Cyberpunk Edgerunners. So, as I mentioned, we saw this a while ago. It is an anime that is written by a Polish person that is produced by Netflix. So, case in point. But yeah, Andrew, you found this that they've come on record and say there's not plans for a season 2.
Yeah, yeah. There was a little bit of coyness, I think, around whether or not Netflix was maybe gonna like pick up a season two or like order a second season, and CD Projekt Red was like, it's one season intentional. Like that's what we really wanted. So I don't know if maybe Netflix was the one pushing for more, or if there was just like internet buzz out there like, "Oh, this is such a great show. We really would love a second season." But yeah, they've officially come out and said like this is going to be a standalone work. That's how you should consider it. And I think if you've watched all the way to the end, it's not really shocking that they would consider this standalone because character-wise, they didn't leave themselves many avenues to go to.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah, I actually love that about it. And I think if they did do a second season, or they did a second rendition of this, the smart thing for CD Projekt Red to do would be to pounce on this popularity from the show, and they would create an anthology series. Because the
Sure.
world they've created is insane. I mean, Cyberpunk
Mhm.
2077, apart from kind of the bugginess that it was, the lore in the world is beautiful. It's a really wonderful world to explore. And I think they could do a lot with that.
Yeah, I agree. I do like this statement from CDPR. I think it's a good call. That this was their plan, and it also plays into Studio Trigger nicely because Studio Trigger, Gurren Lagann 1 season, Kill la Kill 1 season, Darling in the Franxx 1 season. Um, they they tell stories that come to an end. They
Mhm.
have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They are completed, and then they move on to new stuff. Generally speaking, Promare, they made a movie. It's one movie. So I think this is great. You leave people wanting more. Hopefully, people then both want more of Cyberpunk world and more of what this studio is responsible for.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think it's
Well,
the right
it's
choice.
funny that you mentioned that because I was going to text you when I was watching it. I got as like the second episode, second or third. I think it was like the second or third episode. I was watching the show and I'm like, why, why does this feel like FLCL? Like, why
Oh,
am I getting like Felically vibes from this? And then I looked it up, and that's when I figured out that it was the publisher that did that. I was like, oh wow, it's the same publisher,
publisher.
or the same like
Um.
the same group,
Okay. Okay. Okay.
studio group. I don't know what you call them.
I'm gonna look this up because this does not because it's clearly a different team than what I'm talking with Studio Trigger. So I don't think there's any involvement with them here. So yeah, Gainax, Production IG. Production IG is huge, but they're different. There's a name attached. Um, so I'm not not saying you saw something wrong, but I don't know what
I
it is.
could have. I was just kind of browsing around, looking at the studios that were involved with it.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe they had a help from an animation studio that was involved here or something like that. I don't know, I guess, but
Mhm.
but yeah, I can see the similarities for sure. Um there's a
Uh, it looks like they had some overlapping directors for episodes.
okay. Okay. Nice. Makes sense.
But I mean, I
Yeah.
I thought Cyberpunk Edgerunners was a very refreshing take on this genre. Like especially with Netflix kind of. Didn't you come and tell me that like Netflix had been cutting a lot of their animation budget going into this
That was
past
the
year?
tale, yep.
Yeah. And it kind of bummed me out because I was like also a huge fan of the League of Legends Arcane.
Arcane,
Arcane.
I
yeah.
thought
Yeah.
Arcane was really good. And when the
Awesome.
Edgerunners came out, I'm like, that's like another home run. Like that's some serious stuff that they're pumping out here.
Mhm.
That's available to, like what I said earlier with that global, that's available to a very wide audience to really bring a huge popularity to that.
Mhm.
I just thought, in a world where we are oversaturated with entertainment and there are shows all over the place, there's new stuff being produced every single day, to have something that is very pure, very true to its source material,
Mhm.
very well written, very well directed, very concise on the message and the story it wanted to tell, um,
Mhm.
was very refreshing, and I really, really enjoyed that from Edgerunners. Plus, there's not a lot of shows that I watch where you actively have an emotional attachment to the main characters. Like you end up getting attached to these characters and
Mhm.
you truly want them to succeed. Um it was just an emotional roller coaster, and I really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, Tony, you played the game. Andrew, you haven't
Mhm.
played the game, and you both like it.
Yes.
So success, you know.
Yeah, I think Netflix is straddling a line very well recently, with a lot of like video game based content. Obviously, I don't think anybody's going to argue that Castlevania is like a huge success. And again, as somebody who's like barely touched, anything in the
Right.
gaming world, like, to me, that's one of my favorite things that Netflix has produced recently. Arcane, I have never played League of Legends, so I had nothing.
Nor
Even
should
though I
you.
know like even though I know like it wasn't like let me tell you the story of League of Legends, I know it was very like side attached to it. Um, still not having any of that context and thinking like Arcane is also again a really strong production, and then coming here and not having played the game, like, you know, I think Netflix is doing that really well right now. Like whoever they're farming out these projects to, they're making smart hires.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it touches on, because I also, like, I never played League of Legends. And it's one of those ones that I was told not to play League of Legends either.
Right.
Um, but it's also not my cup of tea for games, so it's all good. But what you have with Arcane and Edgerunners is a very
Mhm.
beautiful thing, because you know the people that were behind it, the writers, the animators, they loved the source material. They were passionate about the project itself, and they wanted to tell a really good story and be
Right.
true to that. And I think a lot of what you see Netflix, what they've done in the past, and why I got upset with Netflix is, let's take, and this is gonna be an example. It's probably gonna trigger John. Let's take Cowboy
Oh
Bebop.
God. Oh God.
That's an
Why?
example.
Why? I'm gonna just shut off this camera, this microphone, just like get
I
out of
wasn't
here.
I wasn't on this
I probably
podcast
have
for
time to
the.
make my own like eggnog and rhubarb pie, so I'll see you in a couple hours.
I knew that was gonna be the response too, because I have been on the phone with John for hours as he's ranted about it. So I'm just gonna bring it up though, as a very quick aside. That is a perfect juxtaposition to these shows, as this is what happens when you want to pump something out and attach a name to it just to get viewership,
Mhm.
versus
Right.
this is what we want to do, and we're going to give it to somebody who cares and loves the story, and they're going to present something. The popularity comes from that, because you get that sense of story, you get that sense of they wanted to make something great out of this. And I knew it was good when I had a buddy who had never played Cyberpunk actually ask me, is it worth playing, after watching Edgerunners? And 100% I was like, yeah, play it. Play it.
Mhm. Yep. And you'll love all the connections then.
Mhm.
You'll love all the sound effects are the same. You get a phone call, it's there. You crossing the street and the sound's there. Like all that stuff adds up a lot. Taking music from the soundtrack, and great selection of songs, I think, was a good call.
Mhm.
They, though they're very different styles, the two fit so well together if you migrate from one to the next. And I think that they also made the right call and didn't do what so many others want to do now, which I think is just the worst mistake. We have it with Sony in particular right now, is who I think of. They're trying to take, and they did it with Cowboy Bebop. You try to take the thing that exists and retell that story in a new medium, as opposed to expanding upon. This is not retelling the game story. This is telling another story in this world, and it makes the whole experience more rich. I don't know why people can't learn this. It happened with Star Wars. It's why Star Wars was so great. You had all these pieces that would add to the puzzle. That's why people like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All these pieces that added to the puzzle, it's like each thing builds upon the next and makes the other one better. If you just retell it, they're coming with the Last of Us show on HBO. If you've played the game, fine, you'll rewatch it. You'll watch the show probably, but do you really care that much if you know what's going to happen exactly? Like, wouldn't you rather see how things got started? Wouldn't you rather see a different character and their struggles, or how they got to the point? And now you have questions and you want to play the game because you want to finish that story, or you want more to it. Obviously, not everybody has to do this all the time, but I am definitely a proponent of this. And I think you're only causing more curiosity and building more value to your property by expanding it as opposed to duplicating it.
Let me ask you a question then, because I'm actually excited for the Last of Us show. I really love the game. I just want to see what they're gonna do. It's one of those where like I'm excited because I want to see what they're gonna do. But let me ask you this: so when it comes to the medium of which you want to tell these stories, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, obviously it's an anime. Do you think you could do a Cyberpunk live action story, or do you think the medium would detract from that world?
And I'm assuming by Cyberpunk live action story, you mean like tied specifically to Cyberpunk, like 2077.
Yeah,
like not just like tell me a live action Cyberpunk as a genre story.
No. I'm talking like Edgerunners, but live action, and not the same stories as Edgerunners. I'm just saying like a story like Edgerunners, but live action instead of anime.
Like Lucy makes it, and we're gonna like tell a side story about like what happens next.
Yeah, you could do something like that. But then they decided like they're not going to do it animated; they're going to do it live action.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be my question: is could you pull off that type of story, that motif, in live action?
Current day American media could not, no. But yes, it could totally be done. Like, there's no reason it can't be done. I mean, the 2 Blade Runner movies are amazing. I love the Blade Runner movies. They're, obviously hallmarks of the cyberpunk genre. So yes, we could do it. But
Carbon season 1 is my favorite.
Season 1 though, season 1, and then they dropped the ball.
All I'm saying is
still haven't
season
finished
1.
Yes. So I think it's totally possible. But if it was announced, it's gonna suck. It's gonna suck.
I've been a firm believer now, and I feel like it still holds true. Video games are a medium to tell a story. I still think to this day you cannot make a live action video game movie.
Well,
Like,
do you
what
mean
about
like
The
a
Witcher?
direct adaptation?
Yeah, like either an adaptation or yeah, I'm trying to think here. So an example would be like so remember back when we were kids how they had like movies coming out that were always like the Resident Evil series.
Right.
The Resident Evil movies that were loosely based on that.
Let's emphasize that loose.
Yeah, I'm gonna say loose, very loosely based. And then you had they came up with Doom with Dwayne the Rock Johnson, right? Doom, the movie Doom. I've never seen a movie or a show that's live action. I'm not going to bring The Witcher because I haven't seen The Witcher fully all the way through, and I haven't played The Witcher game, so I can't speak to that. But the ones that I've seen have never been good. to the extent that they really live up to the game itself.
So I still think there's no reason that a game cannot be successfully adapted into a live action movie. I think that most of the problem stems from Hollywood wanting to cash in on a name and name recognitions. They get the rights to make a movie of it, and that's what they do. They aren't particularly familiar with it themselves. They don't actually care about it. It's like, hey, we can tell a cool zombie story and I can put my wife in it, and won't that be fun? And like very little, it's not from the ground up by the team. That's like Cyberpunk. This is by people involved in the game, that or cared about writing it, and they picked the team to do this, and it mattered to that it matched with the world. These are all just often throwaways, and I think some things slip through the cracks. Like the Silent Hill movie is quite fun. The first Tomb Raider movie is quite fun. The Uncharted movie, despite my complaints, is well managed in a lot of ways. So but a lot of the issues I think comes from, again, trying to cash in, not knowing what they're doing, not knowing what they're talking about, or caring about the property, and then trying to, if they do, they're trying to retell a story that when they should just like add to the story,
Right.
fill in pieces of the puzzle, like I was saying.
I 100% agree. I actually watched the Uncharted movie on my way to Barcelona on the plane.
That's
Nice.
fun.
If you didn't call that movie Uncharted, I think it's actually not a really bad movie. Like, I think Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg do a really good job, like kind of the dynamic between them on set. But 100% to your point, they wanted the name recognition, so they said, we're going to throw Uncharted on this and we're going to make millions. It's like,
Yeah.
that's not how this works, man.
Yep. Tony, if you have time, Andrea, you have some interesting kind of themes about the Cyberpunk Edgerunners. If not,
Yeah, I
Tony,
got
I
time.
completely understand. Okay.
I got
Yeah,
some time here. Let's hear what they have.
I mean, yeah, I kind of was thinking, Tony, as you were saying, like, you're watching this and it was reminding you of other shows. I mean, I was watching through this and really thinking of like Gurren Lagann and kind of our main protagonist who is, adopted into like a family of outcasts and kind of adopted most especially by the leader, and then that leader dies, and then our protagonist feels beholden to like carry out their legacy and carry out their dreams for them and their dreams for the world. And it's just kind of this like really interesting overarching question that I think here in the world of Cyberpunk Edgerunners, our main character David gets told this a lot by Lucy. You're living someone else's, or you're chasing someone else's dream. And it just like really just made me think like, are we, when we lose people who have dreams for us, like, are we more beholden to, carrying those out, or like putting so much weight on those and that concept of legacy and living out that vision that others have for us? Or should we be really like, like thinking like, hey, I'm respectful of this and I appreciate, you, but you're not alive anymore. Like, I really need to be living for myself and for the people who are living around me. And I think that's where some of like the excellent tensions of the episodes come in, where David feels pulled between this sense of like, I'm living for the people who died for me, my mom and Maine, and but the crew that he's leading really needs him to be like actively thinking about the present and their lives a little bit more. And there's a lot of tension, I think, throughout the series that's done really well. So just like kind of these like
Yeah.
big like concepts that are just explored in a really unique way.
Yeah, I agree, and it's insightful. To me, it's like it speaks to the Bushido way of Japan. It calls into like honor and respecting your kind of your inheritance, your responsibilities, your like to think outside of and beyond yourself. So obviously this isn't a family situation, but as you say, an adopted family. And it's good to point out the similarity with Gurren Lagann, because that's absolutely true. And so we see how in this, how it that really ends up going awry. And to me, this can be a comment, whether it is or not. It can be a comment on you know, other cultures, but Japanese culture as well. And it's um yeah, I like this thought, and I like how we see the again, the respect in this,
Mhm.
and but then at the same time how disastrously it destroys everything else around, how it really like you say, it pushes other people aside and the needs of the moment. Um and it was definitely a frustration of the show. Like, David, what do you come on, stop. Do you not see, and you mentioned here too, addiction, like because it goes
Yeah.
along with this, then like do you not see what just happened to your adopted father? He did the
Right.
same thing. You are falling down the same steps that he did. And why can you not recognize this and pull back? And it's I think the two issues can be married together well, and it is done so here. Um, yeah, a great, it's a great point.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I especially I was getting so frustrated because, you know, it's almost like David, to me, David had two real lives that he wanted to live. One was this, what you were talking about, where he felt like he was obligated or by honor drawn to carry forth a life that was not his, but that was Maine's vision, and he felt like he needed to do that. But then it was fighting his own life that he wanted to belong and be loved by Lucy, and he had that, he kept ignoring it, and see,
Hmm.
there is that frustration that you get where you see him starting to fall apart, and you're like, dude, it like you can still come back from this, like you can
Yeah.
still take some of the chrome off, dechrome, man, like bring it back, and like just run away, just get away from it all. You've made it, you did it, you proved your point. You became something that your mom always wanted you to become something. You became something, you're successful. You did it. And to watch him just spiral it's sad, it's disheartening, and the story just keeps drawing you in because you think until the last minute before those credit roll that he could still be the
Turn it
person
around.
you as the viewer want him to be.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. And where does it do you get the impression that Chase was ever so, we've talked about with Maine and wanting to do what follow in his footsteps and honor him there, also make something of himself like his mother. Did it ever to you fall into uh more of a pride thing or a power thing at all, or a like taking control of my life? Those things ever become more of an excuse than a legit, because I feel like that would often be potentially the path. But did you
Mhm.
read that in the show at all? Do you feel that from David, where his own, it, you know, he did get too wrapped up into it, and his, thinking he's special, knowing
Mhm.
he's special and he can handle it.
I I don't think so, because I think that's too easy. I think that's too surface level for the show to be like, oh, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and
Mhm.
he it's like his motivation to continue doing it or to continue doing more, to me it never gave off the vibe that he was doing it because he wanted the power or he did it because it
Yeah.
was a pride, like it was he needed to do it. It wasn't he needed to do it because of him. It was like this,
Yeah.
like Andrea touched on. It's honor. It was this two lives that were in constant battle with each other, and he
Mhm.
didn't know how to walk that line or how to choose
Yeah.
or understand which one would actually lead him to the true life that he wanted to live. He's like, no, I have to do both of them, and it
Mhm.
doesn't work that way. And I think that was
Mhm.
a really really good way to approach this, because if they had been like, oh, it's just he wants the power, then he becomes a boring character.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there were certainly moments when you know, like you said, John, like David believing he was special. They were self, you know, they were self-focused, but they weren't about like I want power for power's sake. You know, they weren't like advancing his own self-interest. Like even the moments that he believed he was special and could handle like this burden, they were still about handling it for other people to like prove himself to other people or to feel that he had made these other people proud. And unfortunately, like I said, I felt like they were directed very specifically at, you know, his mom and Maine. And there was not the tension came in between like, you know, I'm doing this for these people who have died rather than like I'm doing this for the people who are living. Like David pushed himself to the point where he was like, I need to rely on myself and I need to live up to this legacy, and sometimes I just really can't see that taking a break from this and focusing on my crew members would be the better path here, you know,
Mhm.
and
It
not
Yeah.
like soloing so much of this
Mhm.
burden.
it
Yeah, and that
almost walks the line of martyrdom. Almost.
Yeah, it does.
right.
It does.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a very weird martyrdom because he's not. It's
Mhm.
like he's not taking on that
Right.
mantle
The men
of
the
I'm.
mentality of it, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not doing this because of you. It's like he's still doing it to almost prove something to his crew, even though his crew doesn't want him to prove anything. Like they
No.
literally flat out do not care. They've said that to him. They tell him that he is the most important thing to them. But in his mind, like it's not good enough.
Yep.
Yeah, and the tragedy of Lucy, spending so much time and being secretive about it. So then obviously that creates a further rift between them. That what is she up to this whole time? But like spending this time, her goal is that they can be together and they can get out of there. And so I feel like she works towards that, but it's really in vain because it's never going to matter if she can't pull David back from the brink.
It's unfortunate that, you know, this is kind of like two people modeling the worst sort of behavior, not the worst sort of behavior, but some bad behavior in this relationship because they're both like Lucy's doing all of this stuff solo, and David doesn't really know what it is and doesn't even know that like most of this is for him. So she's off here being like, okay, well, I'm in this relationship, but also I have this huge part of my life that I'm shouldering responsibility and burden for solo. So it's almost like modeling for David that he should do the same with like the crew and the missions that they do. Like, yeah, like this is how you behave. Like this is how you're, you know, in a relationship. You just like
Yeah.
shoulder this like solo burden instead of sharing it.
Yep.
It's
And then
almost like a reverse toxic relationship. Like usually when you have
yeah,
a toxic relationship, you have two individuals that just hate each other, but for some reason are still in a relationship, and that you can just tell. But this is like they almost loved each other so much that they wanted to.
it was
It's really
destructive.
yeah. It's like
It was
they love each other to
destructive.
being destructive to the relationship.
Right.
Um, and they didn't know how to pull out of it. And I think that's they got so lost in the minutia of their own problems that instead of communicating with each other and understanding what each other were doing, they just both spiraled out in different directions.
Right. And when they came back, it was too late.
It was too late.
And they did a really the overall story and the characters, I thought they did a really good job of balancing betrayal when you trust someone and when you don't. We go through the ups and downs of who you can count on and then who you can't. Of course, we have a team member, Kiwi, that betrays them. But it's
Right.
like, you get in too deep and you work with the wrong people, like Giancarlo Esposito. I don't work with him, right? I guess he's always a bad guy. Um, and yeah, it's so I also like that. Like this relationship was handled very well, and the betrayal or loyalty from different characters was all done in a realistic manner. I think it's something that often gets lost or is messed up in shows, but in anime too, as well as motivation. What's someone's proper motivation? And I feel like it was always made sense. Rebecca always had a thing and wanted Dave's attention and never got it. So is that kind of sad thing for her, that she really gets drugged down in all of this as well. So some really good characters that I thought, rounded out the show well. It really wasn't just the David and Lucy show. There were other players that added to the bigger picture as well.
I think it was some solid voice acting too. Some really solid
Yeah.
voice acting.
Anyone watch it in Japanese?
I did for one.
Okay.
I watched both just out
Okay.
of curiosity.
Yeah, I thought about going back and watching in Japanese, but I really didn't have any complaints with the voice acting in English, so I guess I
didn't
didn't.
I
But
didn't either, which is unusual for me.
sure. Yeah.
It's always good. I enjoy voice acting. I think voice acting is a lot more difficult than people think, especially when you have a person who can do multiple different types of voices. And it's always fun when you hear people that you're like, oh, wait a minute, I know who. You have to like look it up and be like, I knew it. Like one of them, it got me for one episode was figuring out that Matt Mercer played the driver.
Oh
He does
yeah.
the voice acting for that character. I'm a big Matt Mercer fan. I think I like him as
We
a
know.
voice actor.
We know.
I also, it's fun to hear, different voice actors, and you can pick them out very slightly every once in a while. So you can always pick them out a little bit, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, do we have any complaints?
Honestly, I don't. I really don't. Like normally, I like to try to be constructive in some way, but I think this is just a really good. My complaint is it didn't have more episodes.
Okay.
But I
All right,
think it's a
easy wish guy. I wish for 100 more wishes.
100 more wishes. I wish, or as James Acaster said, infinite genies, because it takes care of having more wishes and having friends.
Oh, nice. I haven't heard that one before.
It's a good one. But no, I think it was just a really good package story. It was complete. It was, complex, in depth. It had a very good beginning. The middle caught you on board, and the ending was just satisfying. Just a great story segment.
Andrea, complaints?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's immediately coming to mind. I mean, I'm sure there could be things that you could say, and I could be like, oh yeah, they could have improved, blah blah blah. But I think any of that would be nitpicky. I think, like Tony said, overarching comment is like great story, great acting. It was a richly detailed world that didn't get lost in its own minutia, and I think actually having fewer episodes made sure that we didn't wander too much and that our story was like nice, tight, like it wasn't overly complex and too drug out. So, yeah, I mean, I could have used a few more episodes maybe to explore some side characters or like build some background, but on the whole, like they did well keeping it concise.
I will say, if you played the game before watching Cyberpunk, you knew how it was going to end.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I
I
held out hope. I held out hope for different things,
I
yeah.
did, but once, oh God, what is his face? The
Adam
big
Smasher.
when Adam Smasher got involved, I was like, okay, I know where this is gonna go.
Yeah, no, it's a great, and they put out a tweet for that. They're like, "Hey, you want some revenge against a certain some character? Make sure you pick up the game."
Yeah, which is smart, like
Very
interrelated
smart.
marketing.
You visit a lot of the same locations. I didn't do a lot of the cyber psycho stuff in playing the game. And if I had watched this first, I think I would pay a lot more attention to the cyber psycho issue in Night City.
Well,
So
I'm gonna get a jab in there, John. I think when we first played the game, the Cyber Psycho didn't really exist. otherwise, was it there?
I don't think
Because
that's
every
true. I
time,
think it's there. It was just also it wasn't essential to the main story. You
or
know,
was it one of those ones when he
as
got
now.
there and the cyber psycho's like half in a wall, maybe like sticking his head out, you can't shoot him or kill him, and he's just
Yeah,
glitching
he
out
he
and
went really
freaking out.
psycho. Yeah, he's going crazy. I think my complaint is it maybe it seems silly, but car physics. It was car physics. I didn't like the chase scenes a lot of the
Yeah.
time. I was like, I mean, because I am used to Studio Trigger's style, so it doesn't bother me anymore. I am totally on board, irregardless. Like this was too much. The cars, the way they would like tumble in a hurricane of them, or go over meridians and all this stuff,
Yes.
is just. I'm like, it didn't need to be this. It didn't need to be that, and still could be very
Sure.
exciting and very cool. Alan sharing some car physics craziness and a GIF here or whatever. But yeah, it's
Now that you bring it up,
yeah.
now that you bring it up, and I remember those scenes, I know exactly which one you were talking about, where he's like driving at like 80 miles an hour, and all of a sudden he's just like, oh, okay, and he like hits the median and grinds across it, and then
Yeah.
flips the car back over. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess
Yeah.
we're just doing this
There was
now.
no like augmentation to this car to facilitate this type of behavior and physics. So that took me out of the moment. Those
Sure.
couple scenes took me out of the moment. And particularly with his mother, this was kind of before this was going, but with his mother was involved in the car chase, and then when she dies, I'm like, hit the brakes, hit the brakes, stop, but people do weird things in stressful situations, so I gave it a pass, but
I was gonna say
the
that was actually the most believable to me
yeah, okay, just
car
like
scene.
what is going on here and like getting
Right.
involved in this, yeah.
Well,
Right.
it's funny that you mentioned that because I do sometimes notice that in movies and in animes where they sometimes do this where it's like, oh, the setting is 2077, or it's like the year
Mhm.
is 3200, and they have people in cars like what you consider normal cars, and they get onto like what is their version of a freeway, and they're going like 200 miles an hour, and you're like, did like the laws of physics change? Why are cars moving so fast? I mean, even 100 years from now, cars are still going to be going 70 miles an hour. Like that's not how this
Mhm.
works.
Mhm. Yep.
So, and I noticed that in
Mhm.
this Cyberpunk where she like gets on the freeway, and for some reason they like the way they animated it, the car
Yeah.
was like hyper speed,
Yeah.
plaid
Right.
down the freeway.
Yeah. 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 And it's often have take issue with how vehicles are animated in anime. It's not often the best. Like there's just a
Right.
weight that's wrong, and it stands
Right.
out. But this is way over the top. Way over the top.
Yeah, it's so funny that I think we talk a lot about, the way that like anime can do because it's a certain medium, they can break a lot of rules
Yeah.
and we're fine with it. We just sort of like roll with the punches or like, accept that like certain physics of things just like happen. Uh, but it's really because I think there's so many like realistic car chase scenes in like action movies, we have a hard time like letting go of like the physics of a car.
Sure.
Like we can let go of the physics of a human body and what they can do. Like I'm just thinking about some of like the fight scenes in Castlevania and
Oh
like
yeah.
just like the absolute limits of like the body in a fight and it just sort of like washes over me. But there's something very weighty and material about a car that makes cars
Hmm.
particularly hard to like break rules with.
Well,
I
and
mean,
it's because like people, you just add powers or you add cybernetics. You add a thing to amplify and make it extreme, or they're in a video game and it's a fantasy
In
setting.
certain
So
cases,
yeah.
yeah, but sometimes like it's just the way that like a scene is shot that like somebody's like running around a wall or like doing a flippy and you're just
Mhm.
like that's not physics and they're not like terribly special, but you're just like
Right.
cool. Like
Yep.
they'll just do it.
Mhm.
I think to your point, Andrea, there's definitely a suspension of disbelief when it comes to physics as it pertains to the human body in TV movies and anime and stuff versus physical objects. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
for example, Did you ever watch Mission Impossible Fallout with Tom Cruise
I
and
think
Henry
so.
Cavill?
I've seen them all.
I
Oh
think
yeah.
so.
Yeah,
One of the
Yeah.
best ones.
the fight scene in the bathroom. Okay,
Oh
It's
yeah,
where
yeah,
great.
yeah.
it's an amazing fight scene. That fight probably would have been over in about 3 seconds. Like
Well, yeah.
he takes a dude and puts his head through a porcelain sink. And I'm like, okay, well that's the end of the fight. Like you're not gonna get up after having your
Right.
head blown through a porcelain sink. You're either gonna be dead or completely unconscious. And but the suspension of disbelief is, yeah, this dude, he's gonna get up, he's gonna keep fighting because he's got the honor to keep fighting. But it kind of, to your point, if a car flips over and then keeps driving, you're like, no,
Yeah.
that
Right.
it can't happen.
Right.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, there's something different about like that particular object that we all just like, it's like I mean, they try so hard to push the limits, and it's almost like its own like riff on itself now in Fast and the Furious. Like, what can we do with these cars? Like, they can fly through the air and they can like launch across a bridge and like, drop out of an airplane and whatever. And like, just like, it's so ridiculous now that like it's a hilarious part of the movies themselves to just be like, what completely unbelievable thing can we make this car do? But like in the beginning, when they were more serious about it, like people were like, "This is the worst part of the movie. Like you
Right.
cannot tell me
Yeah.
like these cars can do these things." And it just like, and it was even like things that like maybe are possible. I don't know. But you just look at them on screen and be like, "No. No, no."
As a, you guys both know, die hard, like I'm a car guy, right? You
Yeah.
could write a thesis on the Fast and the Furious movies and like what they have done to that franchise. I will go to the theater and watch I'm gonna go and watch the 10th one.
Absolutely.
Like I'm gonna go and watch the 11th
I
one.
love
Like
that franchise.
that franchise is astonishingly hilariously good. And here's the thing, it's become so self-aware that in the last movie they had a character. It was Angel. It's not Angel. It was another character name. But one of the characters literally calls to attention that he never gets hurt. So, like he's like having this existential crisis in the movie because he's not getting hurt, and he's going through like
Right.
all these insane things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
It's
I think that
definitely
movie franchise has really done like a smart thing in becoming like aware of itself and
Hmm.
not taking itself so seriously and like almost making itself a parody, but not like totally. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Like it has
I
fun
would
at its own
say
expense now.
I would
I mean,
say
it's a
go keep going.
great self awareness.
Oh yeah. And I think the turning point for it though, when it did that, I know this is off topic, John, but like the turning point for that was Fast and the Furious, probably 7 or 8 is when it was just
Yes.
like, now we're going just be like completely insane. What can we
Yes.
do that's more insane than we did last time?
Yes. I would say 7 in
7,
Dubai
definitely 7.
when we had cars like going between buildings. Like no. Like those
Almost to
huge
some
buildings in
extent,
Dubai.
Fast
Yeah.
5, where they're dragging the vault
Yes.
through Rio de Janeiro.
Yes. Oh god, yeah. One of the
Oh,
best in my
so
opinion.
good, so good.
so I think that the creators over at Studio Trigger were just watching Fast 9 and they're like, if they can do it, so
We
can
can do it
we.
too.
Yeah. Mhm.
Lucy totally did it with the, I'm gonna pull the gurney out of the ambulance and drive it on the freeway at 50 some miles per hour.
Yes.
See, that didn't bother me.
I forgot
Like,
about that.
like, yes,
I forgot
unrealistic, but
about that.
that didn't bother me. It's like
It,
it's rolling, it's on wheels, it's straight, like it's fine.
she's not watching the traffic. She could dodge and
Yeah, she's
jump.
not doing any flips or anything like that. So yeah.
Which, if you've ever tried to lift one of those gurneys, is very difficult to
Yeah.
do. And she's
Oh
just
yeah.
like, jump, jump.
Cybernetics.
There you
Cybernetic.
go.
Mhm.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep. All right. Well, Cyberpunk Edgerunners, anime, on Netflix, and we all recommend it. Should all go and take a look at it. It was well done, and then afterwards, go play the game. So
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It's good. Watch it, play it.